Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for the work that you're doing in this cause. You know, a funny thing happened last November on the road to serfdom. It turns out the American people didn't want to go. The message of the last several elections could not be louder or clearer. Great parties are built upon great principles, and they are judged by their devotion to those principles. From its inception, the core principles of the Republican Party have always been individual freedom and constitutionally limited government. The closer we've hewn to these principles, the better we've done. And by the way, from its inception, the core principles of the Democratic Party have always been collectivism, statism, and unconstitutionally expansive government, and the closer they've hewn to those principles, the worse they've done. It's just a simple way of saying Dick Armey's right. When we are like us, we win, and when we're like them, we lose. Now, our party suffered heartbreaking setbacks in 2006 and 2008, not because voters abandoned Republican principles. It's because they looked at Republicans and decided that Republicans had abandoned Republican principles. In 2009, House Republican leaders recognized that, and they resolved to restore traditional Republican principles as the policy and political focus of the party. And they achieved something that nobody thought was possible at the time. They united House Republicans as a determined voice of opposition to the left, and then they rallied the American people. There's a reason why not a single House Republican, not one, voted to squander nearly $1 trillion in so-called stimulus spending. There's a reason that every House Republican, save one, voted against Obamacare. There's a reason that all but a handful of House Republicans voted against cap and trade. The reason is that the Republicans rediscovered why we were Republicans, and Republican leaders rediscovered Reagan's advice to paint our positions in bold colors and not hide them in pale pastels. And at the same time, we made common cause with a grassroots movement of immense importance, the Tea Party. And remember that the Tea Party is not a Republican phenomenon. Pollsters tell us that, yes, about 60% of Tea Party members are Republicans, but 20% are independents. Another 20% are Democrats. Now, I want you to think about that for a moment. Long before the Tea Party, we had another name for that movement. We called it the Reagan Coalition. And we're watching it come alive again in a new generation. They are yearning for a party that will take the stands that once produced Morning Again in America. The result of this return to Republican principles and Republican coalition building was absolutely stunning. 63 House seats shifted from Democrat to Republican, 6 U.S. Senate seats, 680 state legislative seats, 19 state legislatures, and 6 governors. I believe we're on the verge of a great political awakening that will produce a new American renaissance. You know, the debates that occur inside state and federal capitals are merely a reflection of a much larger debate going on right now among the American people. It's a debate that's going on over backyard fences, over family dinner tables, over coffee at Starbucks, and it is upon the outcome of that great debate that the future of our nation will be determined. And that debate's occurring at a moment in time when the American people hunger for the fundamental principles of freedom that define our party and that founded our country. And we are winning that debate. The only way we're going to lose it is if we fail to stand by our principles. And part of that, by the way, is going to be the debate over Medicare. Once the American people understand that under Obamacare, 15 political appointees of Barack Obama will have life or death say over what Medicare services your doctor may provide you and what life-saving services he must deny you, does anyone here doubt for a moment that the American people will overwhelmingly demand the Republican choice, a system in which every patient gets to choose the plan that best meets his or her own needs, with many providers competing to provide the best services at the lowest cost, all brought within the financial reach of every American by a financially solvent Medicare safety net? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a debate that we should all relish. Our message could not be more clear. They say that we're in the worst economic time since the Great Depression. But I remember a time much more recently when we had not only double-digit unemployment, but double-digit inflation, mile-long lines around gas stations, interest rates at 21.5%. Perhaps the reason we don't remember those days as vividly is because they didn't last very long. We elected Ronald Reagan under a bold Republican banner. And he did exactly the opposite of what Jimmy Carter had done, exactly the opposite of what Barack Obama had been doing. Reagan reduced the tax and regulatory burdens that were crushing the American economy, and he produced the greatest peacetime economic expansion in our nation's history. On this centennial year of Reagan's birth, let's not just remember him, let's follow his example and get our nation off the road to serfdom and back on the road to freedom and prosperity. Because I want my children to know what morning again in America actually feels like. I want them to know the optimism that America's best days are ahead, and to know the pride and confidence of American exceptionalism. We know how to revive an economy because we've done it before. All it requires is a Republican president and a Republican Congress that actually practice Republican principles. Or as Winston Churchill once said, give us the tools and we will finish the job. In 1858, Abraham Lincoln warned this nation that two entirely incompatible philosophies, freedom and slavery, competed for the future. And he reminded us that a house divided against itself cannot stand. He said, I do not believe the house will fall, but I do believe that it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. Well, today, two entirely incompatible philosophies, freedom and socialism, compete for our nation's future, and the stage is now set for one of the greatest debates in the history of the American Republic. So what are we to do? The great Republican abolition leader, Frederick Douglass, was once asked that very question by a young protege, what do we do now? He answered with three words: agitate, agitate, agitate. So let's go forward from this conference determined to press that great national debate with every resource at our command and in every forum that we can find. Write letters to the editor, call into talk shows, speak out at public meetings, jump into the discussions on Facebook and MySpace and Twitter, whatever that is. If you see an article online that you think's important, email it to your friends and then leave a comment after it. Paint our positions in bold colors. Agitate and agitate and agitate in every forum you can find, because only when that great debate between freedom and socialism has been settled among the American people will we have a Congress and President fully resolved to save our country. Lincoln gave that famous House-divided speech to the Republican State Convention of Illinois. He ended it with these words that today seem just as much intended for us, his latest advocates, as it was for the audience that day. He said this: 2 years ago, the Republicans of this nation mustered over 1,300,000 strong. We did this under the single impulse of resistance to a common danger with every external circumstance against us, of strange, discordant, and even hostile elements. We gathered from the four winds and formed and fought the battle through under the constant hot fire of a disciplined, proud, and pampered enemy. Did we brave all then to falter now when that same enemy is wavering and disheveled and belligerent? The result is not doubtful. We shall not fail. If we stand firm, we shall not fail. Wise counsels may accelerate or mistakes delay it, but sooner or later the victory is sure to come. Well, I believe that Ronald Reagan was right, that the history of the past 4 centuries tells us plainly that Providence had a purpose in placing this continent where it is, shielded and protected from the old worlds by vast oceans, to receive what Lincoln called the last best hope of mankind, the American Republic. If we stand firm now, centuries from now, I believe that historians will record that in the second decade of the 21st century, just when it began to appear that the nation had squandered its wealth, abandoned its destiny, forgotten its founding principles, and discarded its freedom, this generation of Americans rediscovered, restored, and revived the promise of the American Republic. And from that moment in time, America began her next great era of expansion, prosperity, and influence. Let's go out there and make that happen. Thank you.